"You're covering everyone's meal tonight," my sister announced at an expensive restaurant that charged $440 per person. I hadn't agreed to anything. "Stop being difficult," Dad muttered. I smiled, excused myself to the restroom, and paid only for my wife and kids' meals on the way out. When the server brought the $6,380 bill to their table, I thought, hey, Reddit, the room was too quiet for a family dinner. Not the comfortable kind of quiet, but the kind that presses against your ears, making you aware of every movement, every breath, every unspoken expectation hanging in the air. It was a place where people didn't raise their voices or laugh too loudly, where you didn't ask about prices because if you had to ask, you didn't belong. The hostess greeted us as we entered, already holding menus, not paper ones, but leather-bound and heavy. My kids noticed immediately. "Mom," my daughter whispered, tugging my sleeve, "why are the menus so thick?" I crouched down and smiled softly. "Because the food here is special." She nodded seriously, as if she understood something important. My sister was already seated, perfect posture, perfect hair, phone in hand. My father sat at the head of the table, back straight, expression neutral, the same look he'd worn my entire life when he expected obedience. My mother adjusted her napkin, scanning the room as if checking to see who was watching. It wasn't dinner, it was a performance. We took our seats. The chairs were heavy and solid, reminding us not to shift too much. My kids sat quietly, hands folded, feet not touching the floor. I noticed how carefully they behaved, how early they learned to make themselves small in rooms like this. That realization tightened something in my chest. We hadn't ordered drinks yet when my sister broke the silence loudly and confidently. "You're paying for everyone tonight," she announced, beaming. "You got that promotion, right?" The words didn't sound like a question, they sounded like a decision. Every head turned toward me. The room felt suddenly smaller. "I didn't agree to that," I replied carefully. My voice was calm, but inside, something stirred, an old, familiar panic that came from realizing I'd been volunteered again. My father sighed dramatically. "Don't start," he muttered without looking at me. "You're doing well now. It's your turn." My mother nodded in agreement. "Family takes care of each other," she added, as if reciting a rule instead of expressing care. I looked at my sister, who was already scrolling through the menu, unbothered. "You didn't ask me," I said. She laughed lightly. "Why would I? You can afford it. You always figure things out." There it was not appreciation, but expectation. My kids glanced at me, sensing the shift in the room. I placed my hand on my wife's knee, grounding myself. "I'm happy to pay for my wife and kids," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "but I'm not paying for everyone." The silence that followed was sharp and uncomfortable. My sister finally looked up. "What?" she snapped. I said no, I repeated. Just then, the waiter approached. "Are we ready to order?" he asked politely. Before I could respond, my sister smiled brightly. "Yes, we'll do the tasting menus for the table." My stomach dropped. The tasting menu was the most expensive option. She hadn't even looked at me. "Actually," I said gently but firmly, "we'll need separate checks." The waiter paused, pen hovering. My sister's smile vanished. "You're joking," she said. "No," I replied. My father leaned forward, voice low and sharp. "You're embarrassing us," he hissed in public. I met his eyes. "You embarrassed yourselves by deciding for me." The orders went in, but the tension never left. Course after course arrived, dishes meant to be admired, photographed, discussed. Wine flowed freely, but not for me. My sister ordered extra items for the table without asking. Each time she glanced at me, daring me to say something. I didn't. Instead, I watched my kids, how they waited patiently, whispered instead of speaking, looked at me for reassurance. I realized something terrifying: they were watching, learning. Halfway through dinner, I stood up. "Excuse me," I said politely. "Restroom." My sister smirked. "Don't be long," she said. "Dessert's expensive." In the quiet hallway near the host's stand, the noise from the dining room faded. I leaned against the wall, breathing. Not angry, just tired of being assumed, tired of being guilt, tired of being treated like a solution instead of a person. At the register, I paid calmly for my wife and kids, every item, every tax, every tip. The cashier smiled. "Have a wonderful evening," she said. I nodded. "I already am." When I returned to the table, everyone looked up, ready to leave. My sister's eyes widened. "You didn't," I simply replied. "I paid for us." My father's face darkened. "You're unbelievable." I smiled softly. "Thank you." We stood and walked away. Behind us, the server approached their table with a leather folder. What my family didn't understand yet, as the bill was placed in front of them, was that this time, I wasn't coming back to fix it. By the time we reached the parking garage, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd been holding back until I finally let go. My kids climbed into the back seat, still talking about the bread and how fancy the plates were, blissfully unaware of the earthquake we had just walked away from. My wife buckled them in, then paused, resting her hand on my shoulder. "You are calm," she said quietly. "I'm proud of you." I exhaled slowly. I didn't feel calm, I admitted. I just didn't want them to see me break. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't check it, not yet. For once, I wanted to arrive home before the consequences did. Nearly 10 minutes later, pulling out of the garage, I finally answered. It was my father. I put him on speaker. "What did you do?" he demanded, voice tight and low, furious. "I paid for my family," I said evenly. That wasn't the deal, he snapped. There was no deal, I replied. There was an assumption. I could hear noise behind him, chairs scraping, silverware clattering. My sister's voice, sharp and panicked, rose. Do you know what the bill is? My father hissed. Yes, I said. I do. It's over $6,000, he said, as if the number itself was an accusation. You ordered accordingly, I said. My sister grabbed the phone. You knew we couldn't afford this, she yelled. I felt something strange then, not anger, but clarity. Then why did you order like you could? I asked softly. She didn't answer, instead cursing. My mother's voice cut in next. Stop this, she cried. This isn't who you are. I closed my eyes. This is exactly who I am, I said. I'm just done pretending otherwise. You embarrassed us, my father growled. No, I corrected gently. You embarrassed yourselves by spending money that wasn't yours. The call ended abruptly, not because it was resolved, but because there was nothing left for me to say. That night, I barely slept, not because I regretted what I had done, but because my mind kept replaying years of moments I'd ignored, the birthdays I paid for, the vacations I helped with, the emergencies that always landed in my lap, the times I said yes when I wanted to say no, the times I swallowed resentment because I was told that was love. The messages started before sunrise. I woke up to 32 unread notifications, reading them slowly, one by one. My mother's messages came first, long, emotional, circular. We never meant to hurt you. You took it too far. Families don't do this to each other. I noticed something, she never said sorry. My sister's messages were shorter and angrier. You made me look stupid. Everyone was staring. You owe me for this. That made me laugh out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was revealing. My father waited until the afternoon. He always did, he liked to feel in control. You've changed, he said. When I finally answered, I replied, yes, I have. Money did this to you, he said bitterly. I shook my head. No, I corrected. Money just showed me who you were when I stopped giving it. There was a long silence. Then he asked something I didn't expect. So you're done with us? The question wasn't sad, it was calculating. I answered carefully. I'm done being used. What happens next depends on you. That was the moment the power shifted. I felt it in my chest. For the first time, he didn't have leverage. The days that followed were strange quiet. No family group chat messages, no invitations, no casual demands disguised as favors. Instead of feeling lonely, I felt lighter. My kids noticed, too. Mom, my daughter asked one evening, are we in trouble? I knelt in front of her immediately. No, I said firmly. We're safe. She studied my face. Then why do you look different? I smiled softly. Because I'm not scared anymore. She smiled back. A week later, my cousin called. I didn't say anything that night, she admitted. But I saw it, all of it. She hesitated. They've done this forever. You were just the first one who walked away. That sentence stayed with me. Over the next month, more messages came, quiet ones, private ones, with people admitting things they'd never said out loud before. That they felt pressured, that they were afraid to say no, that they admired what I'd done. My family never apologized, not really. But they stopped asking, stopped assuming, and stopped treating me like a resource. That told me everything I needed to know. One evening, my wife and I sat on the couch, kids asleep, the house quiet. Do you miss them? She asked gently. I thought for a long time. I miss the idea of who I hoped they'd be, I finally said, but not who they actually were. She nodded. That makes sense. Months later, my sister tried again with a single message, we should talk. I stared at it and typed back, only if it's about mutual respect. She never replied, and that was the answer. That's all for today's story. Stay tuned for more videos. Thanks for watching.